Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another wonderful presentation here. My name is Kara Oosterhuis, and I'm the Western Canadian Agricultural Field Editor at RealAgriculture. As some of you probably know, obviously you're here for the Simpson Center for Agricultural and Food Innovation and Public Education at the School of Public Policy at the University of Calgary. It's exciting. We got a great lineup of webinars we've had over the last couple months, and we're excited to have another series here for you guys. I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm even more excited that you guys are here, because without you guys, we would not be able to have these kinds of webinars. So thank you very much for tuning in. We have two exciting guests today. The first one we're going to welcome in is Dr. Simon Somogyi. Simon holds the Arrell Chair in the Business of Food and is the director of the Longo's Food Retail Laboratory in the School of Hospitality, Food and Tourism Management at the University of Guelph. Over the past 15 years, he has led and contributed to research and development value chain projects in countries such as China, Japan, Australia, Pakistan, the Philippines, Indonesia, Kenya, and Canada. These projects generally result in more efficient food supply chains that create and deliver more food at a higher price point, with less waste and with more profitability and economic sustainability for all members of the chain. He has appeared in print, radio, and TV media outlets such as BBC News, The Globe and Mail, The Hill Times, Maclean's, CTV, CBC, Global News, The National Post, and The Financial Post, and is also a co-author on the annual Canada's Food Price Report. He also provides consulting services to the private sector and federal and provincial Canadian governments. He's active on Twitter, so give him a follow at Simon Somogyi AFI, and I'm sure he'd love to give you a follow back as well. So after that great introduction here, Simon, I will let you jump in from here.
Thank you very much, Kara. Welcome, everyone. Today we're going to talk about agri-food production value adding, and I'm going to talk about a number of areas that's related to that. Firstly, I'm going to discuss what I think the main drivers of growth for food value adding in Alberta and Canada is. So before I get started, I should mention, for me, the term value adding is somewhat misused. In my mind, the term is typically used to mean processing. In other words, an ingredient or raw commodity goes into a machine, and then out pops a finished product that someone eats, or an animal carcass is cut up and into cuts of meat and sent to market. And really the discussion about value adding for food is in terms of value, and value for whom? For processors, for retailers, for consumers. The discussion in modern times is more about less about transforming commodities and thinking about value in terms of who's going to buy the product. Albertan agri-food value adding has been pretty much focused in the past on grain and oil seed milling and development of those products, meat processing, and pretty much for convenience more than anything else. And understandably, those are the commodities that are grown and raised closest to Alberta, and therefore its processing or value adding is more for perishability issues or biophysical parameter issues of the commodity that's being processed. And we've seen historical events have an impact on food value adding. As an example, there was the BSE outbreak in 2003, which meant finished cattle had to be processed in Canada and the meat sent to the USA rather than live animals being sent across the border. So that processing and value adding is more about convenience and supplier related factors about driving value adding, and simply because of Alberta's geographical location, making itself an ingredient supplier for local markets, also for countries such as the USA, which is understandable. But looking now and into the future, discussion about value adding, as I said before, is less about these supply factors, but on market and consumer factors. And there's the problem, which markets, what consumers do we target? Canada is an agri-food production powerhouse of the world, but it's typically been an input supplier or ingredient supplier to the world. And the decisions to purchase those ingredients by world buyers have been based on price parameters that are generally impacted by supply and demand factors. Developing markets based on product attributes that are consumer or downstream supply chain factors, and their willingness to pay a premium for those factors. It's a different game. It's about building brands. It's about making linkages with importers, wholesalers, retailers in whatever country that may be. And that's a very different game than relying purely on commodity markets. Next, I want to talk about areas of focus for Canadian and Albertan international agri-food exports now and into the future. As Cara mentioned briefly, I've spent the last 15 years of my career studying Asian markets and Asian consumers for numerous agri-food products like dairy, beef, fibers, forage seeds, seafood, wine. So a number of different products, and it's often said that the 21st century is the Asian century, and for me that still rings true. It's where the majority of the humans on our planet are, and that's not going to change no matter what the current political sensitivities of the US or Canadian governments are, especially when it comes to countries like China. But consumers and markets are different in Asian countries. And business relationships with importers, wholesalers, retailers, in those markets, they take time to develop. You know, those relationships are often built on handshakes with a wish for them as a buyer to understand you as a supplier and a person, not just your contract terms. Asian consumers are somewhat different than Western consumers. Asian consumers, particularly middle-class consumers, have more sort of Western ideals than they've had in the past. And they want Western products, but they want products that are high quality, safety assured, authentic, and they want to understand the provenance of the product. In other words, where the product comes from. And they increasingly want value for money rather than just pure luxury goods if they can obviously afford them. If you take China as an example, engaging with downstream supply members, as I mentioned before, and it can be different than in Western countries. In China, many consumers don't understand what is a good product to buy. They want someone to tell them what is good. And this is evident in the emergence of Daigao networks. And for those that don't know, Daigao translates from Mandarin to English to mean personal shopper. And these Daigaos have had a powerful influence on the exports of agri-food products from countries like New Zealand, Australia. So those consumers, they want quality and they want to know where the product comes from. As I said before, that idea of provenance or the origin of the product. The good thing is provenance is a farm or a location-specific attribute. So selling that's important. We already have this sort of the generic brand Canada, which is generally known as clean, green, high quality. But that's not really a point of differentiation for Canada, as so many other countries have that as well. So going forward, I think there's two ways a country, even a province, can focus its agricultural production and linkages with markets. Firstly, you can be a low-cost provider of food ingredients, or let's just say raw commodities to markets, where you generally compete on price, you're subject to changes in supply and demand that impact your price and the volume you sell. Or you can be more of what I'm about to say, which is a producer of high-quality branded food products to high-value markets. And that generally means you're less subject to price issues. So the choice really is ours. And now I'm going to finish off by talking about policies that could be improved to increase agri-food value-added production and marketing in Alberta and Canada. First of all, we have to recognize that the commodity itself that's being value-added has an impact. Dairy as an example with its supply management system, it's very primary producer focused, it's domestic market focused, but products like beef, even processed products from grains and oilseeds can find export markets. We have a system of marketing boards in Canada and Alberta, and that can make things a little bit complicated, but that's still workable. When it comes to value adding, branding, export market development, it's not an economic exercise. It's a business management function, a business management exercise. And food processors and value adders need business management help to do it. And that help can especially come from the government. We have Export Development Canada, and that provides some services. At the provincial level, we have extension services that provincial government ministries offer. Most of them are very much focused on improvements in biophysical production of whatever it may be. But there is a business management angle or division to most ministries of agriculture, and they tend to focus on numerous things, of which working with business risk management programs such as agri-stability, agri-risk, or other Canadian agricultural partnership programs are offered. They're engaging with that. But we've seen recently Alberta, some of the the economic woes we're all facing because of COVID and other factors, that the Albertan Ministry of Agriculture and Food is reducing its number of business development positions, which isn't great. So government ministries can create a layer of complexity rather than solutions. And Canadian governments, ministries tend to be big in terms of numbers for what is in Canada a reasonably small population. We have 35 ministries in the federal government, 22 in Alberta. That's a level of complexity and overlap in services which can make things complicated. I have a lot of discussions with government on how to boost agriculture, value-added food production and business development. And I talk a lot about the things I've mentioned today to federal and provincial public servants. And many of them say, Simon, we love the idea of what you're talking about, but to do what you are asking would require resources and input from this ministry or that ministry. And we have to combine a whole bunch of different services and government products that we offer into one or a few offerings. For what it's worth, if the choice was mine, for every provincial and maybe even federal government, I'd put the ministries of agriculture, small business, tourism and innovation into one ministry. I'd probably call it Ministry of Primary Industries and Innovation. And why would I do that? Well, to give an example, ministerial services around tourism development are important to the agri-food sector because, generally speaking, in my experience, the best branders and marketers of and development of that for industry in the government is in the tourism ministry. And that could really help agriculture and small business with support programs. But I fear that, from the perspective of politicians, even public sector unions, I think there's very little political currency in amalgamating government departments or ministries. And lastly, to finish off for me today, we talk endlessly about interprovincial trade in Canada. Everyone agrees that it's important. We want to decrease barriers, but little headway is gained. Topics often used as a nice distractor at each premier's conference. So talking about it has led to little gain. But we need to keep on talking about it, and it needs to be brought out in the open. The fact that we treat each province almost like its own country in its own right when it comes to trade is quite mind-boggling in some cases. And when I first came to Canada, I heard businesses talking about exporting to Ontario or exporting to British Columbia, and I just couldn't get over the idea of the perception of having to export from one part of your own country when really exporting is about sending product to other countries. So to finish off, Canada and Albertans have the key ingredients in what we produce and where we produce it to be a successful value adder of agri-food commodities and a successful exporter of them. We just need political will, government assistance, and even support from commodity groups and representative associations to make this a success. So with that, thank you very much for listening to me today.
Thanks, Simon. That was an awesome presentation. I forgot to mention to you guys earlier when we started that there will be a Q&A session to follow once Bill is done presenting. He is our next speaker, but please feel free to put any of your questions into the question box at the bottom of the screen at any point during Bill's presentation here, and we will definitely get to questions that you can both ask Simon, Bill, or both of them. So just let me know who you'd like to ask the question to, and we'll make sure we get your questions answered. So next up, we have Bill, and Bill is the member of the Agri-Foods Board, Ultima Foods Limited, and Cooperators Delegate. He is the owner, operator, and manager of the Silvertop Dairy. We are looking forward to hearing your thoughts on the economics of value-added ag business in Alberta and what some of the roadblocks might be and how it could be improved. So with that, Bill, feel free to take it away.
A little slow. Am I coming through?
Yes, you're sounding great. Yeah.
Okay, so hello to everyone, and just so that you all get some interesting new information, this is the very, very first time I've ever done something like this, so bear with me if I don't come across quite the way you'd want me to. Life is such. So anyways, being a farmer in southern Alberta, just a quick little go through. We actually do run a dairy. We do also have beef cows. We grow crops and we irrigate lands to raise those crops. We process most of those crops to feed our own cattle. And we also have some very innovative ideas in our barns so that we can remain as environmentally friendly as possible in everything we do. So that'll lead me right into, hey, why would a farmer want to get involved in some co-op boards and be part of groups of other farmers? Well, that's an interesting question, and it'll be some different farmers will have some different ideas, and different people have different ideas as to why that happens. But I'll go to the agri-foods organization that I'm involved with right now as a board member. And we've got numerous different products, and I really appreciate Simon's presentation in that he laid out things very interestingly, and he did a tremendous job there. So I'm going to come at it a little bit differently from the processing side of things, since we've kind of learned how to do that in a small way, and we've been working hard to build it a little bigger as we grow. So, and I'll run off some brand names for you for a minute. We own Happy Planet Foods, and we do soups and juices there. We own Meadow Fresh Foods, where we do predominantly milks and different products like creams or other, and we have a tremendous service company out of that. So we'll provide different groups, larger sizes or smaller sizes, depending on their needs in raw product. We own Organic Meadow, and you'll start to see a trend here. So Organic Meadow, based out of Ontario, where it first started, is predominantly organic production on the milk side of things. And Rolling Meadow, which is another meadow. And Rolling Meadow was built upon from Organic Meadow by going predominantly grass-fed. And again, like I said, we're moving into interesting little areas. Then, just this past year, we've acquired the license to provide A2 milk. And that's very unique. And we've just started that process in spite of COVID. And that is working extremely well at this point in time. And last but not least, we also own Earth's owned organization, which has been doing soya products, and especially our latest new hit, oat milk. And oat has been a tremendous hit, whether it's in Canada or the US. We've gone into both countries with that product. And as a matter of fact, the growth has been so tremendous that we've had to add to our main processing factory in British Columbia, just so that we can keep up somewhat with the demand. And I'll throw a couple other things out. So our country, for instance, Canada, very, very large country and population, obviously British Columbia, Alberta, you got about 8-9 million people. Then you go into central Canada, where the predominance of people are. And in our case, we do have facilities both in Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia, quite frankly. And that is to process products so that we can get it to people in a timely manner, in a timely fashion, without the horrendous cost of transportation. And that's one thing to keep in mind when we're producing food products into other products. And I'll just build on, people want to stay local, and we do too. Like for soups, for instance, we will source local products so that we can keep local ingredients as part of the process. So, but in listening to what I even heard on the radio this morning, it brings out a key point that Simon even said. Canada has a record of selling grain this year overseas. the railways have never kept up so good. But in my mind, right away, it hit. Yes, we've basically got rid of the primary product overseas so it can get processed elsewhere. And that's something as a board and as a group that we've worked very hard to look at product and build on small areas, whether it's organic or whether it's in the plant side of things, where we can build on what's good for you and keep it as much as we can in our own country so that we can source product in our own country and process it into product that's usable and very healthy for you as individuals all. So that's part of what we're trying to achieve as much as we can. And being net exporters, I guess, in this country of so many primary products, as an individual, and I think as a people, any way that we can find to value add and process it at home as much as possible. I mean, the dollar's in our favor. We've got some, like in our own province, the tax situation is such that it's a pretty good place to do business. I know that wages tend to be quite high here as well, but anything that we can do in our own country to not only process and utilize those products is a benefit for all of us as Canadians. And I think that's something to be very proud of and something that we very much have to further work on. Another thing when it comes to exports, so on this oat product, that's something absolutely we will work towards the export of that. And any products that we can, we will work toward the export of that as well. But let's keep in mind that we first have to start a base at home. It's got to be successful before that you can endeavor to go into the big wild world. In that, it's a very interesting place when you're dealing with retail, whether it's in our own country or other countries, and those large conglomerates tend to work very hard to maintain their own control of doing things. And when it comes to acquiring shelf space, those are very expensive things. And when you're small, like we are, those are things that you need to figure out and be very nimble about. And you have to have the consumer base that not only loves your product, but is very loyal to you as well. And it takes time to build that whole process. And there's a lot of things in many ways that tend to go against the smaller producers in those sectors. So there's so many things that I can point out that are challenges, but at the same time, there's opportunities as well, and building the reputation and having the quality, backing it up with service at all times is the key for any group or organization to be successful, quite frankly. But it does take time, and it takes a lot of money, and it takes a lot of perseverance as well. And the other thing that's really important is you got to look at where is the puck going to be. And I guess one of the things that we've looked at, since we do have some proprietary processing ability, and that's how to liquefy plant products and take the nutrients and ingredients and utilize them in a way that's beneficial for the health of people. And in my mind, knowing some of the natural products that we grow, whether it's barley, wheat, all your different grains, and even your different hays, like your alfalfas or your grasses. And there's nutrients in all of those, and different nutrients. And those nutrients are utilized to not only feed cattle, but people as well, obviously, across the earth. And I guess finding the right mixes, the right blends, as long as having the natural taste and making sure that your food stays natural and wholesome, those are very, very key items to building new food products that can obviously be very beneficial for people everywhere. And I guess in my mind, I see those type of new products rolling out, over time. And I think you have to keep working on that process to develop and be ahead of the game. And, we're very potentially at some point going to see milk proteins and soya proteins come together. I know we've tried mixes like that, and it's quite phenomenal, the taste of the product. At some point, the consuming public may be ready for some of that, and I don't know. I mean, I guess time will tell. We'll have to look and see how that works when that rolls out. And just to, I guess, finish a little further on the, so how can, the governments and their processes help us, I guess, as small processors across the country to be more successful? I think Simon did lay out a very good way that, or a good potential way to do things. Governments, though, are very slow and very bureaucratic in ever getting things done. And small business generally has to figure out ways to do it themselves. And I'll use our little Happy Planet part of our business as a really great example of how, with service and being very unique in the different kinds of products that you deliver in a specific area, that you can build a reputation and you can grow that reputation. And I guess in my mind, if you get closer to larger population centers, and you can build small organizations that can do kind of a gate to plate service and provide what's needed on time, to me, that's a really great start to help grow those kinds of small businesses that really don't need any help. It's just a matter of getting it done. And who knows how maybe it's going to go back, to house delivery again, for all I know. I mean, many things are house delivered at this point in the times that we're in. And a lot of that is going back to how it used to be. You used to have the milkman deliver products or the baker deliver products. All of those things happened at one time. I mean, maybe a lot of that will come to fruition. And as a matter of fact, we're doing some trials in a few areas to see how that's going to work out. So that is kind of the possibility of a wave of the future. I guess looking at how we're going to be more robust, I guess, in getting better economic growth for our country by export. I guess in my mind, I still look at it, whatever we can do as not only a country, but as small business and organizations to process and further process as much as possible before moving things out, to me, would be the best way to carry on and do things. And I want to throw another point in. I happen to be on another board, so this is not on the ag side, but it's on the power side of things. We actually are part of a rural electrification group, and it's totally different. It's still owned by people who are in agriculture, but it's also an interesting learning that we've undertaken there. And it talks about the end result is how can we further help Alberta? And that's where I happen to be right now. And as a group, Equus, by the way, if you want to look it up, EQUS at some point, look it up. And the other website was Agri-Foods International. Look that up as well when you get the opportunity, and you can learn a lot more about what we do. But I want to talk a little bit, and it won't take too long, about our combined heat and power units that we put in, along with solar and with some battery units as well, that we put into a brand new building that we just built. And we did that for a reason. Since we're in the power business, we put poles and lines in, and we happened to purchase power on behalf, or for our membership, actually. And we put this in, and we want to see if we can prove a point that we can actually be self-sustainable in providing energy for our own building and see what kind of a payback we can get on this system of combined heat and power, solar, and obviously battery backup. And we set it up with the latest technology, quite frankly. We've only had it running for, I don't know, 3-4 months now. And how the first look at it is, it's working phenomenally. And the CHP unit actually is not even broken in appropriately yet. And there's many times when I've watched the computer live on our website to where we're producing enough power totally for our own needs, and we're actually putting some back into the system. And the reason I bring that up is we're looking for more of a home for natural gas in our province. And guess what? There's lots of small business in this province, and that business all uses electricity, and using natural gas to produce that, and especially in the areas like, for instance, our home operation, it would be very beneficial to do that. And so far, the capital cost is the only thing that stopped it. But if we could find a way to make that work better in Alberta, that quite frankly would be a very big plus, not only for people in Alberta, but for those who sell natural gas as well. So I just thought I'd end it off on a little different note because I can go all over the map. So I appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Bill. It's great to have you on here. And Simon, I'll get you to now come back on as we are ready for our Q&A session. So as I said earlier, we got a few questions in here, but keep them trickling in. We got the next 15-ish minutes to tackle them. So feel free to send them our way. So the first one here is a question for Bill. You are really doing a great job of growing into new processed food areas. Are these products primarily for Canadian consumption or export? And what percentage is exported?
Okay, right now, everything that we do on the organic side, everything actually on the dairy side is completely Canadian. The small a bit of export that we have are Happy Planet products, whether it's soups or juices, and our products through Earth's Own, which are mainly oat and soya products that are sent predominantly to the US right now. There's some also going to Hong Kong, believe it or not. So that market is opening up for us as well.
So that leads into a question for Simon. When we talk about agri-food products in international markets, are Eastern Canada markets aimed at Southeast Asia as much as Western producers are?
I think it's an interesting point. I think if you look at some markets for some commodities, if you look at Far East Canada with the Maritimes and Atlantic Canada, they're heavily dependent on seafood production, and seafood is an international product. It's traded internationally, and particularly, say for example, Nova Scotia sells $1 billion worth of shellfish to China. So they are focused on end products into Asia a little bit more. But that's not to say that there's not opportunities for what is produced in Alberta. It means that we have to be focused more on, as I said, that idea of selling the place, creating a brand around the place and where we are at, about Alberta. And we need to keep on developing that so that the consumer understands that New Zealand lamb means something more than just it's tasty lamb. It means that it's good quality at a low price point. We need to come up with that brand for those particularly East Asian markets, what we have here in Canada. So, sorry, going around in a circle to answer your question, I'd say it is a little bit more based on the nature of the products that they have, but there's no barriers to suggest that it couldn't be the same where we are in Alberta.
Okay, now this one I think could go towards both of you. Can you see Canadian primary agriculture producers as continuing to consolidate their processing businesses in order to compete globally, even with our niche products? Is there a minimum size that we need to see to make these businesses work?
I can start.
Go, Bill.
Having been involved Many of you have probably heard the name Yogo, I-O-G-O, with the two little dots. So actually, I was on the board when we developed that product, and it's had a quite interesting go. And I could tell you many stories about that, but I won't. Just in looking at what small cooperatives can do, and I consider us a small cooperative, we can find ways to work with other cooperatives, to work together in areas that one has a better way to do things than the other, so that we could actually combine some forces in order to export product. And some of that is beginning to happen at this point, quite frankly.
Simon, any thoughts?
Whenever I see the word consolidate, and whenever I think about Canadian consolidation in processing, I automatically think, why are they doing that? And what the bell that rings in my head is that it's to make the whole business amalgamation a more efficient business, which means let's just reduce costs. So and by reducing costs, you're trying to make it as cheap as you possibly can, which is understandable because all businesses want to do that to maximize profit and revenue, well, maximize profit, I should say. But if you think about the ideas of brands, and that's sort of what I've been pushing today, is that if you want to keep on consolidating, why are you consolidating? If it's for cost measures, or is it for we want to gain access to a new processing facility in a particular area that allows us to brand it as that area, or brand it as something unique or niche? If it's the latter, I think that's going to be a little bit more sustainable, because keep on trying to be an efficient price operator only gets you so far.
Absolutely.
Can I throw one more item in to help that process along? Now you heard me talk about our brands like Organic Meadow, Meadow Fresh. We're doing the Earth Zone and A2 milk and things like that. Now, numerous different retailers obviously have wanted us to process under their brand on their behalf. And there's absolutely no way that we're ever planning to do that, because our strength is in our own brands, and our strength very much is the following that we have gained in those brands. And there's no way that we're going to dilute that, because the minute you dilute it to retail, your brand is going the wrong direction. So building on what Simon just said, that brand business, that's key.
Absolutely. So we have another question here. Given Canada's large agricultural production, it seems like there is great opportunity. What are the biggest obstacles to scale up, and what types of services and programs can help?
I might take a stab at that one first. Scaling up just means making bigger. That's what I think in my head. And big is good, big is efficient. I've worked with small canola farmers. I'm originally from Australia. You can probably tell from my voice. I'm not from Canada, but I've worked with Australian canola farmers who press their own oil, who then brand it as their own farm oil and then sell into China, and even have Chinese tourists coming to the farm in Australia to see where it's produced because they care about where it's come from. So I think there's types and services you can offer. I think what is politically unpopular now is the changing to any sort of help for the agri-food sector, particularly at the farm level. We have all these business risk management programs that are provided by the federal government, and to be a little bit blunt, they're all about maintaining agricultural production, to de-risk it. In a lot of countries, de-risking is value adding. Can't just be a prime producer. I've got to then start a cooperative or go out on my own, invest in some sort of production facility to then make brands sell whatever it may be that I do. So I wouldn't mind seeing some of those BRM programs that are offered by the federal government to assist farms to, as Bill talked about, setting up cooperatives to then put a bit of skin in the game to then start branding and making that product for market.
Okay, Bill, any thoughts?
Well, if I can jump in there, I have two trains of thought a little bit there. So being in an area where there's some producers, and I'll talk mainly on the grain side here, that have significant acres that the small producers in no way can compete with that process anymore. And I've seen all of that happen through time already. And part of me really, I guess, thinks about how much better smaller farms in many ways are for the local communities. And if you end up getting, 50,000 acre farmers and things of that nature, you've gotten rid of hundreds of people who used to shop in local areas and local communities. And whenever you allow that whole process to take place, you have a rural sector that becomes dependent on smaller cities for their supplies and fewer places to get supplies. So you actually create a significant problem doing it. And I can see the other side of the coin as well. There's always both sides to a coin. But I think people really appreciate the fact that there's still more people that are taking care of the lands, and that you don't have such a gigantic size of things, that there's so few people left to run them. But that's just a personal thought.
Thank you for your thoughts. We have another question here that says, a number of years ago, smaller meat processing plants popped up in response to the BSE crisis. They have now fallen by the wayside mostly as they could not compete globally. Is there some government policy that could have helped these businesses survive?
Maybe I'll jump in first. Meat processing is an efficiency game, and the business case for small only works so far. And there's been a lot of calls since we had all the shutdowns with the cargo because of COVID-19 outbreaks around, well, we need more redundancy in meat processing, but we're talking about plants that cost tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to make it work commercially. You got to think about the reasons why they were set up in the first place, to supplant what was a problem in response to BSE, and now the commercial reality just doesn't exist. Do we want to keep on running or supporting business models that aren't successful into the future, or look towards new business models that work? I think probably the latter is the better. But yeah, that meat processing is a low margin, big volume game, and there are artisanal processes, but they're really focused on market rather than focused on just processing.
Yeah, Bill, I have a question here for you. What are your views on how best to leverage artisan and novel foods to develop new businesses that can reach greater markets with their value-added products?
So I think it depends on the foods, and that's usually how things start with new and improved products. There are little products at home, little cheese business. You create a yogurt. You create a tremendous product, and you start with it locally. It basically starts with family, friends, neighbors, and people that you know. And I know numerous individuals who started those businesses. And ultimately, when they get big enough, guess what? They get sold and they get devoured into other organizations that have a better capacity to carry on with them. But to start an artisan business, the people involved need to have a tremendous love for it. And they end up, they market their love and their caring for that product, whatever it may be, to the public. And that's how it gets started in the first place. So to me, hey, if you love something that much, go for it, because probably you're going to make it work.
Yeah. So this one is more for Simon. So the question here is, what about the Canadian market? Why do we import frozen pizza from Germany, raisins from South Africa, frozen strawberries from Chile, pickles from India, et cetera, et cetera? We cannot sell value-added products to Canadians. So what do you propose to enable sales into international markets?
I think, some of those examples you just read out, Cara, they exist because wherever that product is made, I think you mentioned raisins in South Africa or frozen strawberries, they've got a large volume of production of that strawberries or raisins. So you've got a critical mass of that, which allows you to do that, all the processing really efficiently, and then spread your costs of doing that production, particularly the processing as well, across the thousands of units or millions of units you set across the world. So it's got to be commodity dependent based on where you are. And if we're trying to compete against those big producers with those really efficient operations from scratch, where we don't have any of that critical mass, that's just an extremely difficult way of running a business. So, and to the point where it's almost not impossible. So yeah, trying to be a frozen pizza business or whatever it may be might not really quite work. But we can if we think about the raw commodity. We have a critical mass in. Let's not focus on price. As I said, I'm sounding like a broken record, but focus on branding who we are. And I think it gets to that point in Canada. We're not great branders. We're great at producing. But we're not great about talking about ourselves. We're not great about getting out there and really being marketers and pushing that. But we can get better there. And that's the good thing. And the support services around that. Yeah.
So before I wrap up here quick, one more question that really ties into that, Simon. How can Canada create more iconic brands then? What is required? Yeah,
I think, and I know where we're wrapping up, but I think Canada doesn't have a global agri-food brand yet. We're not there yet. I said I'm Australian. I think of Foster's. I'm sure if you're involved in the farming community, you've got a pair of Blundstone boots or something like that that's made from kangaroo skin. So it's an agri-food product, but we don't really quite have anything like that's iconically Canadian. The closest I can think is maybe Crown Royal, because it's a brand that gets into export markets.
Maple syrup.
Maple syrup, but that's a good example, maple syrup, Cara, because that's a commodity itself. It's a syrup, but it's not a brand. We don't have a brand for maple syrup, really. The maple leaf picture, I'm talking about the actual company, but the picture of a maple leaf has an iconic identity with Canada, but we don't have a brand that sort of relates to that. We need to help businesses do that. And I think Bill's given some great examples of how we can start niche, have that passion for it and build that up and then scale rather than just sort of sell out.
Absolutely. Okay, well, unfortunately, we have to wrap up. That time goes by so quickly. Sorry for those questions that we did not get to, but we appreciate your comments and really appreciate you guys, Bill and Simon, for coming on and providing your insight. For those of you that are tuned in, please keep an eye on your inbox for a follow-up email. And if you haven't registered to join us on November 12th, please do. We'll be welcoming Dr. Jared Carlberg for a paper preview of his soon-to-be-released Simpson Center paper on the Alberta beef industry. Canada plays in the big leagues with its major agri-food exports, among them Alberta beef. To compete, 75% of our beef production goes through only 3 plants in Canada. Jared will explore the risks, benefits, and reasons behind this situation. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. It is always a great time, and I will talk to you guys soon again. Thank you very much.